Hi, this video is in response to a video that Oskar ter over at the virtual Fechtschule put out a while ago on HEMA, on Real Fighting is BS. Great video. Love the video. It's a personal favorite of mine. Please go check it out if for some reason or somehow you've managed to find mine first, which I'm more than happy to have you here. But please go watch it. It provides a lot of context for this video. But in that video, Oskar has a section on HEMA as self-defense and why it's impractical for it. And I can understand his point to a great degree, but there's an aspect of it that I disagree with, which I will elaborate on later. So, to provide the context for this argument, or for his argument, the analogy that he gives is that if, say, I were to go around carrying a messer with the intention of using it as a deterrent or a self-defense implement, that would be impractical for modern-day society. The majority of places that HEMA is practiced in the world, with the exception of maybe Texas, one of its, in my opinion, few redeeming qualities, you cannot carry a sword or sword-like object openly in the streets and expect to not be stopped by police and potentially incarcerated. On top of that, if for some reason I were to be in a situation where self-defense would be necessary, potentially with another armed opponent, the analogy that he gives is a individual brandishing a machete angrily at me, and I were to defend myself with techniques that would be applicable to the situation, such as the techniques that Lecountner or the Lichtenauer tradition label as earnest techniques, or techniques to be used in earnest, that would likely kill my aggressor, and I would likely be indicted with murder charges, and it would make life a whole lot harder for the community as a whole. And so for those reasons, HEMA is impractical and in some ways foolish as a self-defense system. I hope that I summarized that adequately. Oskar, please correct me if I'm taking that out of context at all. But moving from that onto my counterpoint, or my stance on it, Oskar appears to be employing, whether it be intentionally or not, a strawman fallacy in this. He's marrying the techniques employed in the systems to a specific tool, the messer specifically. Now, marrying techniques to tools isn't necessarily a bad thing for a lot of the context in HEMA. A lot of the things that you can do with a rapier wouldn't necessarily be as applicable if you, say, have a Polish saber, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of crossover with a lot of different types of weapons. For example, I can very easily apply a lot of concepts from messer to a machete. And even I can apply a lot of the concepts for swordsmanship to just a sturdy walking stick, of which this is not, but it serves the point. In fact, if we just take the analogy that I brought forth and that Oskar brought forth, and replace the use and carry of a messer with the use and carry of a walking stick, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more palatable and a lot more practical in today's context. For one thing, it is a lot safer to use against somebody without potentially killing them, but at the same time dissuading them from harming me. So if somebody comes at me with a machete as an object that's less than 2 feet long, and if I with an object that's nearly 4 feet long, bat at their hands and at their face, or try to keep distance with backwards lunges, etc., etc., all of which would be very practical with messers and are frequently described with messers and other tools within HEMA as a whole, along with those general philosophies of swordsmanship and striking and biomechanics, etc. I don't need to I'm not limited in the use of those techniques to a single tool. I can apply them elsewhere, and they maintain their practicality within this context. And HEMA in general is not a bad martial art to understand a self-defense scenario. In fact, self-defense is covered in some of the treatises. Now, you would have to understand those contexts. You would have to understand the context at which self-defense is applicable within martial arts, such as, for example, the use of Fiore's dagger versus unarmed would be a great example of a martial arts system and a set of techniques that you can employ against a knife, a kitchen knife, or a screwdriver, or similar knife-like, a similar object mechanically similar to a knife. And that would be completely practical for today's environment. Not necessarily the most efficient, but certainly better than nothing. Now, we have, and on top of that, the general concepts of HEMA, such as, or the general benefits of HEMA as a martial art, such as, and the foundations of it, such as the German systems being built off of wrestling. Wrestling is incredibly practical in self-defense, understanding how to control an opponent's weapon, how to control your body and their body, and how to put them in a submissive situation, or damage them bodily in a way that they're no longer a threat to you. These are very practical. On top of that, the respect that it can imbue, and that we try to imbue in our practitioners and in our students, etc., and the reality of how easy it is for you to get hit with a weapon when your opponent is armed, especially if you are not, is a very good mentality to instill. Some of the cons of it is that it's not necessarily the most efficient martial art in order to apply this to. There are certainly modern martial arts that are suited for it because they're built around our context today. But I don't want to give off the impression that HEMA is absolutely useless or even detrimental to modern self-defense, because as long as you understand your local laws, as long as you understand the general concepts of HEMA, the context that you're trying to apply it to, and what techniques you can practically apply to that context, you should be fine. So yeah, that's my piece. I hand this back to Oskar so that way he can say his piece, whether it be down in the comments or in a separate video. But thank you for listening, and have a good one.